Ambassador Ibrahim Salih, Ambassador Kabuchi, Mr. Masimba, the head of UNIC, Ambassador Dijani. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin by saying that it is a personal honor for me to commemorate the 40th International Day of Solidarity with my people amongst friends in South Africa. I can't think of a more appropriate place and a friendlier company to commemorate this important date, especially as you mark the year of Oliver Tambo, an iconic figure who inspired freedom champions around the world and whose tireless struggle for his people's freedom literally changed the course of history. In South Africa, the Palestinian cause finds support and understanding of comrades who have walked down the same arduous path to freedom and prevailed despite the odds. Allow me as well to recognize extraordinary people with us today. Dr. Nabil Shah, a man who has dedicated his life to the cause of our people, who is always armed with unbeatable optimism and faith in victory. For those reasons and more, he is a mentor to so many in my generation of diplomats. And Ms. Navi Pillay, a fearless human rights defender who does not tire from speaking truth to power, and who perseveres in advocating for universal respect for human rights, even when situation is bleak and seemingly helpless. And Professor Lapierre, an educator who dedicated his life to teaching generations and principled supporter of the just cause of my people. The International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people carries a lot of symbolism. As you know, it is also a date on which the UN General Assembly adopted unprecedented and never repeated decision of dividing, or rather gutting, a homeland into two countries. And while Israel was established and subsequently recognized over almost double the land allotted to it in this resolution, the Palestinian people's basic right to materialize this statehood, even if just on the remaining and still occupied 22% of their homeland, remains denied by the occupying power, Israel. Ironically, while international solidarity with the Palestinian people grows exponentially every year, the political attitude of the occupying power grows more intransigent and belligerent. The current Israeli government is the most overtly racist and extremist government the world has ever dealt with. It openly espouses hostile and racist policies towards Palestinians and other racial groups. It makes no secret of the fact that it intends to maintain its system of racial discrimination, oppression, and subjugation in Palestine indefinitely. More worrying, the current Israeli government is more comfortable in its belligerence than any government before it, thanks mostly to the political protection and blind support it enjoys in some parts of the world, partly due to the rise of populism and populist political figures. But as far as we are concerned, the most worrying element contributing to this belligerence and impunity is the lack of concrete action by many states that claim to support international law and universal human rights values. This glaring disparity between political positions and actions creates a sense of immunity for Israel, an assurance that no matter how obvious or outrageous its transgression against Palestinian human rights or international law, the most it will face is a stern statement of condemnation. And as we all know, the absence of accountability is a perfect recipe for continued aggression and injustice. The Israeli occupation of Palestine has been ongoing for half a century. No doubt this occupation and its racist characteristics does not fit the definition of occupation under international law. It has turned into a colonial regime with all that entails. This Israeli colonial occupation bears many characteristics of apartheid and has the aspects of permanence. Israel's multi-layered system of control, discrimination, and subjugation of the Palestinian people is designed to create and maintain absolute domination over our people, down to the smallest detail of daily life. This regime controls where, when, and how the Palestinian can move from one community in Palestine to another. In many cases, this regime controls when and how Palestinians can move in and out of their own community to gain access to education, health services, and jobs. In other cases, the regime's extreme control extends to life choices, where Palestinians in some communities are denied the right to live in their hometown if they marry someone from another community. The occupation regime also uses a separate set of military laws and orders with the sole purpose of subjugation and oppression. This is most evident in the mass incarceration of Palestinians, including minors and elected officials. Since 1948, Israel has detained at least 1 million Palestinian children, men, and women. This number must astound and shake us all to the core, for it does not simply represent the number of people tried and summarily convicted in kangaroo military courts. It reflects generations of Palestinians systematically targeted and scarred by the brutality of occupation, with intention of breaking them and altering the collective will of an entire nation. It is a policy designed to incarcerate a nation into subjugation and submission. But as you friends know very well, this policy does not work. It cannot break the will of a proud nation to live in freedom, despite the pain and suffering it causes to countless families. Ladies and gentlemen, nothing is more representative of the colonial regime and apartheid regime of the occupation than the illegal settlement regime. This regime illegally confiscates Palestinian land, exploits Palestinian natural resources, and denies Palestinian access to water, land, and other basic rights. All the while, this regime is designed with a clear intention of confining Palestinian communities to specific areas under the military guard and control of occupation, as well as making the lives of countless communities literally unbearable, so that they may either leave or simply give in to survive. Physically, this illegal colonial regime is manifested in settler-only roads, settler-only infrastructure, military protection and most dangerously, immunity from accountability for settlers who are free to carry and use weapons to terrorize and assault Palestinians, their property and places of worship, with increasing impunity and belligerence. Palestinians, their property and places of worships are all under attack with impunity. This colonial regime is hotbed of racism and extremist view that demonize Palestinians and celebrates their suffering, including the vicious murder by arson of 8-month-old baby and his parents at the hands of a group of settlers. These scenes of celebration were documented and broadcasted by settlers, a testament to the depth of hate, racism, and impunity that governs and maintains this form of colonialism. Of course, and needless to say, that all of this is in violation of international humanitarian law and international human rights law, including preemptory norms, and in particular the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. The situation on the ground in Palestine is very difficult, and regrettably, the political horizon for a solution is fast dissipating. But this should not lead us to despair, because the way to confront these illegal practices and widen the inevitable horizon of freedom is quite simple. So long as Israel's occupation remains profitable and comfortable, it will not feel compelled to change its policies and attitude. To ensure this happens, the Palestinian people need actionable solidarity. What does this mean? Simply put, it means keeping the spirit and message of Oliver Tambo alive. It means that the Palestinian people need true friends like South Africa to adopt specific and actionable measures that confront the illegal measures of the Israeli occupation and align itself with the clear obligations under international law. Security Council Resolution 2334, adopted a year ago, provides an important legal and political guides for such actions. Specifically, we need countries to take the brave step of legislating a ban on products and or companies produced or profiting from illegal colonial settlement regime. We need countries to cut all military ties with this colonial racist regime and hold those who commit crimes against our people accountable in line with their international obligations, as well as hold NGOs that aid and abet the colonial regime Israel has established in Palestine equally accountable. This also requires combating the cynical attempts designed to undermine bringing the Palestinian concerns to international forums, either by attacking states that vote in favor of respect of Palestinian rights, or attacking the institutions that endeavors or endorses resolutions that are in line with international law and their respective mandates. It requires confronting the bullying campaign by Israel and its allies on its behalf to coerce states and officials, public figures, academics, civil societies, parliamentarians and others who stand up for the illegal actions of this colonial regime. This is fundamentally important to the advancement of the spirit and letter of international laws as well as Palestinian and international rights. This step is vital to advancement of peace. It is not against Israel or pro-Palestinian. It is pro-human rights and international law and pro-peace. It is also anti-occupation, and no one needs to apologize for that. For years, the African people just struggle against apartheid seems to fall on deaf Western ears. For years, countries turned a blind eye to the objectionable policies of that regime, while others, like Israel, maintained support to the apartheid regime despite the facts. Regardless of the reasons, the world could not turn a blind eye to apartheid forever. With the perseverance and solidarity of people worldwide, apartheid became increasingly costly until it became simply untenable. Oliver Tambo was instrumental in this transformation, specifically in his advocacy of holding the regime accountable in line with international law. Together with these exceptional comrades, including the icon President Mandela, this extraordinary leader changed the course of history and inspired us all to keep marching towards freedom. Back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, some policymakers could have claimed plausible deniability about apartheid. Even if their arguments were unconvincing, they could have cited lack of independent information, documentation, or any other similar pretext. But they simply cannot claim that in relation to Palestine, especially in these days, this question is the most documented and studied ongoing conflict of our times. For now, many have found a pretext and excuses for not taking the legal and political steps required under international law to confront the illegal practices of Israel towards my people. They can hide behind the fact that no countries have adopted real measures in this regard. Deny them that fig leaf. Lead the way. Help Palestine achieve the needed transformation in creating the legal and political consequences necessary to end a century of ongoing injustice. We look to South Africa to take its natural leadership role in defending the spirit and standing of international law and the dignity of man in Palestine and beyond. Thank you for your continued principled support and camaraderie. On behalf of the proud people of Palestine, I would like to wish the people and leaders of South Africa continued prosperity. Thank you. Thanks again, Abdul, and I thank both Tariq and Khalid for their questions. In relation to the first question by Mr. Tariq, which relates to the question of the two-state versus one-state solution and the de facto situation and the realities on the ground. Well, let me first assert that Palestine for the Palestinian people is all dear, whether it is the partition part or the part which was allocated for the Palestinian people under international law and international legitimacy. But we have, at a certain point of our history, reached the mere reality, even by our closest friends, that no one will accept to recognize your claim to all of Palestine at a certain point of history, including your closest allies. We, the Palestinian people, are only the only ones who recognize our belonging and our attachment to each and every part of historical Palestine as such. And this is why in the early days of the PLO and the Palestinian Revolution, we did not agree to any kind of partitioning of Palestine. We said that we are willing to establish a one-state solution under which democracy will rule, and this state will encompass all people who had the Palestinian identity before 1948, i.e. Jews, Muslims, and Christians of Palestine. Not that we believe in the injustice that the UK and Great Britain has imposed on us as a people, but the reality of the fact that there were people during that era living in Palestine. And this has stayed on up until 1988, if you know of the history, when Palestine declared its acceptance, the Palestinian people representatives declared the acceptance of establishing an independent Palestinian state on 22% of historical Palestine, with a just solution to the refugees question, and with along the lines of 194 resolution, because time was passing and realities were taking and shaping up the international public opinion. Nations were gaining their independence, and we were left behind. So the fight was about retaining the Palestinian identity and not allowing it to be scrapped. The fight was about to reimpose that identity through statehood and nationalism, Palestinian nationalism, because the whole target of the scheme of colonialism in Palestine and everything was to scrap that identity. And I would refer you and everyone else to the way we were described, whether it is in the Balfour Declaration as others, whether it is in the partition resolution as Arabs, without specifying the identity of those Arabs who are, because we had a specific, yes, we are Arabs, but we have specific national identity, and that is Palestinian. And as we went on, the intention was to change us into a nation of stateless people who are standing in lines and groves to get their part of what the UN and the international community was willing to give. So we tried to avoid that, making the Palestinian identity completely dissolute as it was planned. And because of the struggle of our people and the insistence of our people to continue on, we managed to continue with our national identity. As such, the idea will remain. The core of the idea will remain recognition of the right of the Palestinian people and their identity to self-determination, independence. Self-determination entails several other aspects, but including independence and the right to statehood. Now, we Palestinians are asked always to recognize realities and the de facto that Israel is establishing on the ground. And if we do that, we should recognize our non-existence. As such, I don't follow Israel's plans to me. I follow what my people and our people intend. And up until now, the biggest portion of the Palestinian people are happy to live with the two-state solution. Not because Ramallah is dearest than Haifa or Yafa or any other part of Palestine, but because we want to live in peace and to have our identity and our state resurrected and established, and to allow for our refugees to return to their homelands. Now, the bottom line is that we're not leaving. We're not packing and leaving this land. Whichever solution that will be, we're working hard to achieve peace and to achieve the two-state solution. But if that will not mature because of Israeli illegal actions, the Palestinian people are not packing and leaving. They will continue to exist in Palestine. And one day, soon, we will be the majority between the river and the sea. And it's the choice of Israel whether it wants an apartheid state or whether it will give the Palestinians their civil rights or right to self-determination, which will be statehood. Waiting up until that, we will not give up our struggle. We will continue to strive to gain our independence and to attain our rights. This is according to international law and international legitimacy. I captured that also, Mr. Khalid. I kind of covered some of the aspects of the question given, but maybe in relation to what have been speaking about Egypt. Egypt has stood always beside the Palestinian people all along, and it paid a dear price throughout history. Yes, the siege of Gaza, which is Israeli making and should not be thrown at the shoulders of Egypt, and we should focus on the criminal, not the consequence of this crime, has basically shifted the focus from Israel towards Egypt and the borders. I don't think Egypt at any time of its history has put forward its land for sale, whether it is in Sinai or anywhere else. We have never received an offer from Egypt to expand the borders of Gaza or elsewhere. Our land is well known, historical Palestine, and we will continue to live within these borders. Certainly, we look forward to have mutually good relations with our neighbors. The situation that Gaza went through is unfortunate, but it is the making of Israel, and we need to keep the focus there. Gaza was meant to be outside the picture. Gaza was meant to be outside the occupied Palestinian territory. Gaza was meant to become an Egyptian problem, and we strived along with our people who paid a very high price not to make it so. And we have reached at a stage now not to change that course of history, and as such we maintain the unity of the Palestinian land. This is the story, and this is how it should be reflected. And our focus as Solidarity Group and others who are striving to defend Palestine should focus on the culprit of these crimes, not the ramifications of the problem, which is Egypt opening the border or not opening the border, which is the result of the way our people in Gaza and the Palestinian people of Gaza has suffered from because of the 3 wars that Israel has launched against them. Thank you very much, and I hope I covered as much as possible from your question.